When a fan threw a crumpled paper at Tupac during his most emotional song, the rapper stopped mid-verse and nearly walked off stage. What he read on that paper later would change everything and leave 40,000 people in tears. It was November 12, 1995, at the Oakland Coliseum, and Tupac Shakur was performing what would become one of his most legendary concerts. Just 4 months out of prison, he was raw, angry, and more powerful than ever. The crowd of 40,000 was electric, hanging on every word as he poured his soul into each verse. But nobody in that arena knew that in exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes, this concert would go from legendary to life-changing. Oakland wasn't just another city for Tupac. This was home. These were his people, young, struggling, fighting to survive in a world that seemed determined to crush their dreams. When Tupac stepped onto that stage, he wasn't just performing. He was speaking truth to power, giving voice to the voiceless. The energy that night was different from any other Tupac concert. Fans had traveled from across the country to be there. Some had saved for months to afford tickets. Others had driven straight through from cities hundreds of miles away. They came because they needed to see him, to be in the presence of someone who understood their struggles, who had lived their pain. Security was tight. Death row records had been receiving threats, and there were rumors of rival gang members planning to disrupt the show. But Tupac had refused to cancel. "My people need this," he had told his security team. "They need to know I'm still here, still fighting." As the concert began, the atmosphere was electric. Tupac opened with Ambitions as a Rider, and the crowd erupted like a volcano. The bass was so loud it felt like earthquakes. People were crying before he even finished the first verse. For the first hour, Tupac had the crowd captivated. He performed two of America's Most Wanted and California Love with such intensity that the entire arena became one massive party. But then something shifted. When Tupac began Dear Mama, the atmosphere transformed from wild energy to something sacred. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was church. "When I was young, me and my mama had beef," Tupac rapped, and you could see the pain in his eyes. In the audience, grown men were wiping tears from their faces. Young mothers were singing every word, seeing their own lives reflected in Tupac's story. During the bridge, something beautiful happened. The entire arena began singing together, 40,000 voices as one, and I Love My Mama. The sound was so powerful that even Tupac stopped and listened, tears streaming down his face. "Y'all feel that?" he asked when the song ended. "That's love. That's the love our mamas gave us when the world gave up on us." The crowd roared its approval, but Tupac wasn't done. He walked to the edge of the stage, removed his bandana, and spoke directly to the audience in a way that felt like he was talking to each person individually. "I see y'all out there. I know what you're going through because I've been there. The eviction notices, the empty refrigerator, the nights when you didn't know if tomorrow was going to come. But we're still here, ain't we? We're still fighting." That's when he began the opening piano notes of Keep Ya Head Up, and the arena fell into a reverent silence. This song was different. It was Tupac's anthem of hope, his message to everyone who felt defeated by life. But what none of them knew was that in the third row, center section, sat 16-year-old Marcus Thompson, clutching a piece of paper he'd been carrying for 3 months. The paper was worn from being folded and unfolded so many times, stained with tears from the nights Marcus had cried himself to sleep. Marcus wasn't supposed to be alive to see this concert. When doctors had diagnosed his brain tumor in August, they'd given him 3 to 6 months to live. It was now November, and Marcus was living on borrowed time. Each day was a gift, but also a reminder that his time was running out. His mother, Sandra Thompson, had worked double shifts at the diner for 2 months to save enough money for these tickets. She'd sold her wedding ring, her only valuable possession, to afford front row seats. She knew this might be Marcus's last chance to see his hero, the man whose music had kept her son fighting when everything else failed. Marcus had written the letter during chemotherapy. Sitting in the hospital room, bald and weak, watching other kids fight battles no child should face, he'd poured his heart onto paper. He'd written about his fears, his dreams, his mother's sacrifice, and how Tupac's music made him feel strong. He tried mailing it to Death Row Records, but it was returned undelivered. Tonight was his last chance to deliver his message. As Tupac sang, "Keep your head up, ooh child, things are gonna get easier," Marcus felt something stir inside him. This was it. This was women. With shaking hands, he crumpled up the letter that contained his soul, and with all the strength his cancer-weakened body could muster, he threw it onto the stage. But what happened next would shock everyone, including Marcus. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tupac was in the middle of the song's most emotional verse, singing about staying strong in the face of adversity when the paper hit his foot. He looked down, saw the crumpled note, and his expression changed instantly. In that moment, all the frustration of his recent legal troubles, the pressure of constantly being painted as a thug by the media, and the weight of trying to be a voice for his community while battling his own demons came crashing down. Hold up, hold up. Tupac shouted, cutting off the music with a sharp hand gesture. The band stopped playing immediately. The backup singers went silent. 40,000 people fell into stunned silence. You could feel the tension ripple through the arena like electricity. People who had been dancing moments before were now frozen in place. Mothers instinctively pulled their children closer. Security guards tensed, ready for anything. Tupac picked up the paper and held it above his head, his face dark with anger. "Y'all think this is funny? Throwing trash at me while I'm trying to give you something real? While I'm trying to share my heart with you?" The anger in his voice was unmistakable, raw and personal. This wasn't just about disrespect during a performance. This was about years of being misunderstood, of having his message drowned out by controversy, of trying to be a positive force while the world wanted to paint him as a villain. Security guards started moving immediately, searching the crowd with their flashlights, trying to identify who had thrown the paper. In the third row, Marcus Thompson sank lower in his seat, tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking as he realized he'd made a terrible mistake. "I'm up here, bleeding my heart out for y'all," Tupac continued, his voice echoing through the now silent arena. "Telling you about struggle, about pain, about keeping your head up when the world is trying to destroy you. And somebody thinks it's cool to throw garbage at me? Nah, we ain't doing this tonight." Sandra Thompson grabbed her son's hand, both of them terrified. She could see her son falling apart beside her, could see the regret and desperation in his eyes. This was supposed to be Marcus's moment of joy, possibly his last happy memory, and it was turning into a nightmare. Several people near Marcus were looking at him now, having seen him throw the paper. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of throwing the paper away in disgust, Tupac did something that surprised everyone. He walked to the edge of the stage and his voice softened. "You know what? Maybe somebody out there has something important to say." He held up the crumpled paper. "Maybe instead of assuming this is disrespect, I should find out what's so important." The arena remained dead silent. You could hear people breathing, hear the air conditioning humming, hear hearts beating. Marcus felt like he was going to pass out from fear and anticipation. Tupac uncrumpled the paper slowly, and as he read the first few lines silently, his entire demeanor began to change. His face went from anger to confusion, then to something that looked like shock, then to an expression of deep, profound sadness. He read the letter silently for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then he looked up at the crowd, and when he spoke again, his voice was completely different. Softer, more vulnerable, thick with emotion. "Dear Tupac," he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper, but still carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm 16 years old. I'm dying, and your music is the only thing keeping me alive." The collective gasp from 40,000 people was audible, like a wave of shock and sadness washing over the arena. People immediately started crying before they even heard the rest of the letter. The word dying spoken by Tupac in that vulnerable tone hit everyone like a physical blow. Tupac's hands were visibly shaking now as he held the paper. His voice grew thicker with emotion as he continued reading aloud. "I know you probably get a million letters, And mine probably doesn't matter. But your music has been the only thing keeping me going since the doctors told me I have brain cancer 3 months ago. They said I have maybe 6 months left, but I'm already 3 months in and I'm scared. The arena was so quiet now that you could hear individual sobs from the audience. Grown men were crying openly. Mothers were holding their children tighter. Even the security guards had stopped their search and were just listening, their own eyes filling with tears. Tupac paused in his reading, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. When he looked up at the crowd, his vulnerability was visible to everyone. This wasn't the tough, controversial rapper that the media portrayed. This was a human being, moved by another human being's pain. You rap about fighting against the odds. Tupac continued reading, his voice breaking slightly, about not giving up when the world is against you. Well, my world is against me right now. The cancer is winning, and I don't know how much longer I can fight. But when I listen to Keep Your Head Up or Dear Mama, I remember that maybe I can be strong like you. Tupac stopped reading again and looked out into the crowd with tears now streaming down his face. The tough exterior that had made him famous was completely gone, replaced by raw, human emotion. The letter goes on, he said to the audience, but I need to find this young man first. Marcus Thompson, where are you? Don't be scared, brother. You're not in trouble. You're the bravest person in this building tonight. Marcus was frozen in his seat, overwhelmed by fear, embarrassment, and disbelief. His mother had to physically push him to stand up. When he finally raised his shaking hand, Tupac's eyes immediately locked onto him. What Tupac saw broke his heart completely. Marcus was obviously very sick, painfully thin, pale as paper, wearing a baseball cap to cover his bald head from chemotherapy. But what struck Tupac most was the courage in the young man's eyes. Despite his fear, despite his illness, there was still fight left in him. "Come here, little brother," Tupac said gently, his voice now completely transformed from the angry tone of minutes before. "Come up here with me." The journey to the stage took nearly 10 minutes. Marcus was so weak he had to rest several times. Security guards helped him navigate the stairs. The entire arena waited in respectful silence as this dying teenager made his way to meet his hero. When Marcus finally reached the stage area, Tupac didn't wait for him to climb up. The rapper jumped down from the stage to meet Marcus at ground level, demonstrating that this young man was important enough for Tupac to come to him, rather than the other way around. For a moment that felt like eternity, the two just looked at each other. Tupac saw his own pain reflected in Marcus's eyes, the pain of fighting against odds that seemed impossible, the exhaustion of being strong when you just wanted to give up, the fear of facing mortality too young. Marcus saw in Tupac not just his musical idol, but someone who truly understood struggle, who had fought his own battles with the world and survived to tell about it. "How long do the doctors say you have?" Tupac asked quietly, but his microphone still picked up the question. "Maybe 2 more months," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible but somehow carrying through the arena's perfect acoustics. Tupac's face crumpled with pain at that answer. He looked at this incredibly brave 16-year-old who had risked everything just to deliver a message of gratitude and inspiration, and made a decision that would define the rest of both their lives. "What's your favorite song of mine?" Tupac asked, putting his hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. "Dear Mama," Marcus replied without hesitation, his voice getting slightly stronger. "It reminds me of my mom. She's been taking care of me through everything. She sold her wedding ring to buy these tickets tonight. She wanted me to have one perfect night before ... double quotes." His voice trailed off. Tupac turned to look at Sandra Thompson, who was still in her seat, crying so hard she could barely breathe. He gestured for her to come down to the stage as well. "Ma'am, would you please join us?" Tupac called to her. "Your son just taught me something about courage, and I think it's time the whole world met both of you properly." As Sandra made her way to the stage, helped by security and other concert-goers, Tupac turned back to Marcus. "You said in your letter that you don't think it matters," Tupac said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Brother, let me tell you something. Your letter is the most important thing that's happened to me all year. You reminded me why I do this. You reminded me who I'm fighting for." When Sandra reached the stage, Tupac embraced her immediately, and she broke down completely in his arms. This single mother, who had been carrying the weight of her son's illness alone, suddenly felt the support of not just Tupac, but 40,000 people who were witnessing her strength and sacrifice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tupac announced to the crowd, his arm around both Marcus and Sandra, "I want you to meet Marcus Thompson and his mama, Sandra. Marcus is fighting a battle that would break most grown men, but he's doing it with more courage and grace than I've ever seen. And Sandra, she's the kind of mother I wrote Dear Mama about, a warrior who sacrifices everything for her child." The arena erupted in applause, but it wasn't the usual concert cheering. It was respectful, emotional, the sound of 40,000 people acknowledging something sacred. "Marcus," Tupac said, "you threw this letter at me because you wanted me to read it, right?" Marcus nodded, still unable to believe this was really happening. "Well, I read it. And you know what? You're wrong about one thing. You said your letter probably doesn't matter. Brother, your letter is the most important thing that's happened to me all year." Tupac then did something that no one expected. He sat down on the edge of the stage with Marcus and Sandra and began to sing Dear Mama acoustically, without any music, just his voice carrying through the arena. But this wasn't a performance anymore. It was a conversation. As Tupac sang, he would pause to talk to Marcus, to ask about his mother, to share his own stories about his mama, Afeni Shaker. "When I wrote this song," Tupac explained to Marcus and the audience, "I was thinking about all the single mothers out there doing the impossible, raising kids in impossible situations. Your mama, she's one of those warriors, Sandra Thompson. A single mother who worked 2 jobs to pay for Marcus's medical bills, was crying so hard she could barely stand. She'd never felt seen or appreciated the way Tupac was seeing and appreciating her in that moment." The concert continued for another hour, but it wasn't really a concert anymore. It was a celebration of life, of courage, of the bond between mothers and sons, of fighting against impossible odds. Tupac invited Marcus to stay on stage for the rest of the show. During each song, he would include Marcus somehow, having him speak a verse, dedicating songs to him, telling the audience about his courage. When they performed Keep Your Head Up again, this time Marcus sang along, his weak voice joining Tupac's powerful vocals and 40,000 people singing in unison. It was one of the most beautiful sounds anyone in that arena had ever heard. As the concert wound down, Tupac made an announcement that shocked everyone. "Marcus, you said in your letter that my music helps you fight. Well, I got news for you. You're fighting harder than I ever had to fight. You're the real warrior here. And warriors stick together." Tupac then announced that he was going to spend the next day with Marcus and Sandra, that he wanted to hear more of Marcus's story, and that he was going to make sure Marcus felt like the king he was. The next day, Tupac showed up at Marcus's house in Oakland. He spent the entire day there, not as a superstar visiting a fan, but as a friend spending time with someone who mattered to him. They talked about music, about life, about courage. Tupac played unreleased songs for Marcus and even wrote a short verse specifically about Marcus's fight against cancer. But most importantly, Tupac listened. He listened to Marcus's stories about the kids at the hospital who didn't have anyone. He listened to Sandra talk about the financial stress of medical bills. He listened to Marcus's fears about dying and his dreams about what he wanted to do if he lived. That evening, Tupac made phone calls that would change everything. He arranged for other cancer patients to attend future concerts and quietly paid Sandra's medical bills. But here is the incredible part that still gives people chills today. Marcus Thompson didn't die in 3 months. The hope and purpose he felt after meeting Tupac, combined with experimental treatment, gave him strength to fight harder than ever. Marcus lived for 2 more years, 2 years filled with calls from Tupac, surprise visits, and a friendship that inspired thousands of kids to keep fighting. When Marcus finally passed in December 1997, 3 months after Tupac was killed, he was surrounded by love. At his funeral, they played the recording of that Oakland concert, and there wasn't a dry eye in the building. The story became legendary among Tupac fans. That crumpled letter reminded Tupac why his music mattered, that his words could give hope to people fighting impossible battles. In later interviews, he often mentioned Marcus. If my music helps kids fight a little longer, then everything else is just noise. Tupac could have ignored that paper, could have finished his show without knowing the story behind it. Instead, he chose to listen, to care, and to use his platform to change someone's life. Sometimes the most important moments happen unexpectedly. A piece of paper thrown onto a stage became a bridge between two people who needed each other, a dying teenager who needed hope, and a controversial rapper who needed to remember why his voice mattered. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of listening and caring. Have you ever experienced a moment when kindness changed everything? Let us know in the comments.